I'm Marty Cohn, and welcome to episode 23 of PR Benefits, a show that explores the role of public relations in the COVID-19 era. I've been a PR practitioner for over 45 years, helping a wide array of organizations successfully communicate their messages to targeted audiences. I mistakenly thought that 9/11 would be the watershed event in my lifetime. Communicating in the aftermath of that tragic event was challenging. Then came the global economic crisis of 2008 with more lessons in crisis communications. However, 12 years later, we have the coronavirus pandemic with new challenges in uncharted waters emerging. My guest today is Steve Alschuler, president of Alschuler Communications in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, here's a little bit about Steve. Prior to founding Alschuler Communications in 2013, Steve was president of LAK Public Relations, the New York-based public relations firm he co-founded in 1993. Before that, he served as senior vice president at Rubenstein Associates, a large New York public relations firm, and as press secretary to the New York State Committee on Investigations, Taxation, and Government Operations. He's a frequent speaker, published author, included in 2000 Outstanding Writers of the 20th Century, Who's Who in America, Who's Who in the World, and Who's Who in Finance and Industry. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. It's nice to know that with all those credentials, I'm the 23rd person you thought of having on your show. Nice to know where I stand in the pecking order. Thank you. It's nice to see you, Mark.
Well, wait a second. You were 2000 Outstanding Writers, so you're in there. You're in the top. You're in the top 100.
Great to see you in your bucolic setting.
Thank you very much. Well, Steve, so as I was, as I do, I Google you, not stalk. I Google to find out about a little bit about you. But one thing that was missing, and I'd like to hear about, is how did you get started in public relations?
It may have been my fate. I grew up in New York, in the Bronx, and the newspaper we had delivered to our house every day was the Daily News. One of my earliest memories in life is sitting on my father's lap on Sunday morning while he read to me the Sunday paper. And it was, for those who are not from New York, the Daily News, the tabloid. Sports sections in the back, it's where we always started, back page. I was a Yankee fan, he was a Met fan. We'd work our way forward, get to the news eventually. And if I was patient enough, we eventually got to the comics, which were my favorite part of the paper. But I was a news guy right from the start. So it was probably meant to be that I would end up in a profession that was so integrally tied to the news business. I thought of my father when you contacted me about being on this. When you and I first met, you gave me a stamp, and my father was an avid stamp collector his whole life, and to this day, he passed away a number of years ago. There's a collection of thousands of stamps that going through were sort of recollections of a roadmap of his whole life, going back to his service in World War II. So there's a nice connection there. But at any rate, I eventually did learn to read and write, and went to college. And my first job was working as a reporter for a weekly community newspaper in Manhattan. I eventually got myself a job part-time as a copy boy at the New York Post, which was a great experience in the sense that it taught me I didn't want to work on a newspaper. uh, had to figure out what to do next with my skills. I got myself a list of New York area elected officials, started with the A's, making phone calls. By the time I got to the G's, a state senator by the name of Roy Goodman had an opening and was willing to interview me. I landed that job, became his press secretary, worked there for 7 years, and that was a fantastic experience. The investigations committee that you mentioned was able to investigate and hold hearings on virtually anything that was happening in the state of New York. So we were involved in a lot of big stories at a very early stage in my career. Went from there to a large PR firm, and from there to founding my own business.
All right. So one of the takeaways, two takeaways from what you just said. I'm really glad that the first day cover had some meaning. I'm sorry for the loss of your father, but you're a Yankees fan.
Yeah. It had a rough couple of nights. Whenever someone watches this, we've lost 2 in a row to Tampa Bay. And let's see if we can wage a comeback tonight.
Well, I have to tell you, see, I was born in the Bronx, but my family were Brooklyn Dodger fans. So we weren't allowed to, as a kid, I couldn't even have a Mickey Mantle baseball card. And
you must have had a tough time growing up in the Bronx as a Dodger fan.
Well, my father took me, I went once in 1963 to Yankee Stadium. I remember, but when the Dodgers left, we became Met fans. And I have great memories of attending opening day at Shea Stadium after all the years at the Polo Grounds. So, but the Yankees, and then when I moved to Boston, I went to the American League and became a Red Sox fan. So the Yankees. Sorry. Anyway, all right. Thanks for bringing me back to that. All right, so let's keep going. Since we're going back in time, let me take you back to pre-COVID-19. So go back 8 months. When you think back, what are some of the highlights of your pre-COVID-19 career?
Yeah, I probably have the feeling that most people have, which is that it seems like a very long time since we were pre-COVID. I hope this turns into just a fleeting moment in our lives when we look back in years from now. I mean, look, I've been very lucky in my life, and be working in a profession that I love, and to have been involved in a lot of things that have been very exciting and very enriching for me. Of course, career-long highlight was building a firm, growing from nothing to a firm with some small local clients and a very local New York City footprint, to one that was national in scope, that represented a lot of large clients, a lot of large prominent crisis management projects. It became one of the larger independent firms in New York. So that was a very exciting ride to be on. And as I say, when you love what you do, your favorite project is whatever you're working on now, and tomorrow it can be something else that becomes totally captivating. The great thing about this business is you get to be part of the lives and the business of a whole range of clients, help them grow, help them build something. It's very satisfying. But if I had to name a couple of highlights, one would be New Orleans after Katrina. That was a pretty big deal. We were brought into that to handle communications for a private firm that had been hired in 2005 to take over the the financial operations of the New Orleans public schools, which were under federal investigation, and a lot of people ended up going to jail for corruption. But 6 weeks into the job, Katrina hit, and the world changed. And I spent probably about half my time for the next 2 years in New Orleans and working essentially as the outsourced communications department for the New Orleans public schools. New Orleans is kind of reminds me of a crisis management story, which is, a guy jumps off the top of the Empire State Building, and as he's passing the 35th floor, somebody sticks his head out the window and says, "How you doing?" And the guy yells back, "So far, so good." It kind of depends where you are in time. And I have a vivid recollection of being at home in New York. I'd gotten one of the last flights out before the storm hit on a Saturday morning, talking to a member of my team on the ground in New Orleans who was at the school system's cable TV, public access cable TV channel, posting messages about school being canceled on Monday and athletic activities being canceled and different other events being canceled. We'll be posting every day and frequent updates through the day. And I remember hanging up the phone and feeling pretty good about things. We were on top of it. We had a team, we had a system. We were getting out information. We sort of had things covered. And then 2 days later, the levees were breached, and the world changed. And was not going to go back to normal for a very long time. That was incredibly challenging. It was, if you can't remember time pre-COVID, try to remember time pre-social media. We had addresses for people, but no one was at those addresses. Everyone had relocated. We had emails for people, but people didn't necessarily have internet access or their computers with them. Everybody wasn't walking around with a phone at the time. So we had to create, out of whole cloth, a communications network and a method for getting out information to people. And then go about the task of rebuilding the school system, and to be able to support in some way the work of the people who were doing that was kind of an incredible experience. Later on, handling the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy was very exciting, historic event in our economic history, part of a great economic collapse, and international interest in it. And for about 3 years, we worked with the managers who were brought in to run the company, to dispose of the assets, to manage the assets and eventually dispose of them, to deal with creditor claims, to deal with court proceedings. And it ended up with a very good result for all involved, and something I was very proud to be associated with. You mentioned 9/11. Anybody who was in New York at the time, anybody who was doing business in New York, remembers that as a seminal point in their lives. I think of it as my business bar mitzvah. Today I am a man. You've got to lead an organization of your own, whose people are in crisis. Our industry didn't necessarily fare well during that. It was an economic collapse, very hard on the PR business. Our firm did very well. We came through it nicely. At the same time as your clients are all in crisis and they need you more than ever. Being able to rally around that and support our own people and support our own clients in times of need was I'd say another memorable experience in my life.
Yeah, those are, thanks for sharing those. So now let's jump ahead to where we are today. What are you doing for your clients during COVID? What anything different? What are you doing for them?
Well, maybe this is a benefit of being our age. You've been through a few economic cycles and a few crises in your life. Excuse me. um, and yeah, we're really applying all the lessons we learned during and after 9/11. Uh, uh, be relevant, be valuable. Um, Whatever scope of work you had with your client, tear it up. Start with a blank piece of paper. Your scope of work now is to find a way to be valuable, find a way to help. Um, Talk to your clients more than ever. Don't just tell the account executive to call them. Get on the phone, talk to them, understand where they are in their own in their own marketplaces, what their challenges are. Figure out a way to lead whatever change is happening rather than just have it be something that's happening to you. A lot of times that translates into thought leadership, whether it's an educational institution that is gearing up to do more job training programs and retraining programs to deal with people who's been totally disrupted by the economic displacement that's happening. Whether it's a real estate developer who's got thoughts on what remote work is going to mean to real estate market in the future, whether it's a healthcare institution that's really in the thick of it and is planning its own strategy going forward. You want to find a way to have a seat at the table while those strategic conversations are going on, so you can fish around in your clients' heads and pull out those kernels of things that allow you to function and be valuable. You want your clients need to be relevant. They need to be visible at a time like this. They need to be showing their stakeholders their value. You have to do the same thing with them. It's very easy to freeze in a situation like this. Nobody needs you to freeze. That's not going to do anybody any good. The news cycle is what the news cycle is. You can't fight it. You can't make COVID not be the story. You can't make a presidential election not be the story. It also doesn't do anybody any good if you just decide, well, in this environment, we can't tell a story. You have to find a way. You have to find a way, or you're not serving your clients. And I've found almost every time you really can find a way.
So let me ask you. You mentioned during Katrina and the need to communicate, but back then we didn't have social media and iPhones and things like that. Are you finding it during COVID? We have those things. We have the social media. What about the traditional media? Have you something that I've always relied on, but in my neck of the woods, the newspaper is falling on hard times, and I have a different relationship with the newspaper than I had. Different in that I'm talking to them and giving them stories, not just about my clients, but just things that I hear about. But what are you finding with the traditional media in the Pittsburgh area?
Well, we have our own situations here that are somewhat unique to us, but probably illustrative of what's happening globally. The Trib predominantly publishes online now. They have some community editions that appear in print. The Post-Gazette is in print some days and online the rest of the time. Downsized, ownership's in a fight with the union. Not a good situation. But a lot of great work being done there. great reporters, great staff, who have been there a long time and are very committed to their jobs. I really admire that about them. But shrinking opportunities. Look, it's you sort of go back to basics. Who's your client? Who's their audience? Who are they trying to talk to? What's their message? What's the best way of communicating that message to that audience? It really is as simple as that. Sometimes it's social media. Sometimes it's self-publishing. Sometimes it's traditional media. And sometimes it's alternative online media outlets, bloggers, vloggers, who have taken the place of the parts of traditional media that traditional media isn't focused on anymore.
All right. So what do you think? I have to be optimistic that we're going to emerge from this COVID-19. What do you think the role of public relations is going to be for society as we emerge? When we emerge?
Yeah, people are always going to need to communicate. I think that it's a basic function. COVID is not the event that is going to be totally disruptive to our business and our lives and the way we do our business. It's technology, the way it always has been. In 10 years from now, and 20 years from now, COVID's not going to be disrupting our lives, but artificial intelligence will, robotics will. There are going to be ways of communicating that we haven't conceived of yet. And we're going to need to stay abreast of that and be able to utilize them and take advantage of it. But it really does go back to those same basics I was just talking about. Who are you trying to communicate with? What's the message you need to communicate? What's the best way of communicating that to that audience? And use whatever tools are available to you. And in 10 years from now, they may be different tools than they are today, just like today, they're different tools than they were 10 years ago. But the methodology, the strategic thinking around it is still going to be the value we bring to it. A large part of what people in our business do are mechanical things. They're the furniture in a PR campaign. They're putting out press releases. You opened a new office, you hired a new executive, you launched a new product. There are things that have to be done that are kind of the normal, stable things that you do. And any number of PR people can do it very well. But what clients really always need and will always value is a level above that. It's being able to help them think about their business in ways that they hadn't thought about it before. It's being able to get into their heads, to understand their business. That's the first thing, to understand their business, and be able to layer our skills on top of that and present them with ideas for advancing their business. We're a means to an end. And sometimes practitioners forget that, and they think, well, I got this much publicity. I had this many pitches out. No, it's how did you advance your client's business? How did you advance your client's interests in ways that they couldn't have without you? That's the thing that they value. That's the thing that makes us important. Otherwise, we're telemarketers. Tell us a story and we'll pitch it. That's not the business I've ever thought of myself as being in. And I have lifelong relationships with clients because of it. It's because they value that kind of partnership. They value your being in the trench with them.
Thank you, Steve Alschuler, president of Alschuler Communications in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for being on the show.
Thank you. Good to see you, Marty.
All right. Well, I also want to thank Rich Melanson at BCTV for helping to edit the show. Rachel Cohn, my daughter, a professor of art at Ball State University, for helping me with the technical assistance on the podcast. And also Twin Musicom for their music, Hat the Jazz, that you hear at the beginning and end of the show. I'm Marty Cohn in Vermont. Stay healthy.